Going live, going live. We are live. Zara, welcome. Welcome to the Hybrid Chats. Now, first of all, last week with Sebastian Kinlay, I did have to get my better half, Georgie, to help me get live or yeah, become live, if that makes sense. I'm so bad at technology. So, Georgie, if you're watching this right now, I did it all by myself. Thank you. Welcome to Hybrid Pub Chats week 2. Today we've got a special guest on, Zara Piergianni.
Great,
Is
perfect.
that right?
Nailed
Uh,
it.
for the listeners, Zara and I have spent 5 minutes trying to get that role for myself, trying to get that right. So Piergianni. Now, Zara, um, where's that from, may I ask?
So my husband is half Italian, and before my surname was Green. So I've definitely gone up in the world in terms of surnames. And it's funny because my husband, although half Italian, is actually blonde. So in our relationship, I
Oh,
actually do look more like the Italian now.
there you go. There you go. Now on this topic then, how did you guys meet? Come on, spill the beans.
Gosh, do you know what? We met in a nightclub, believe it or not. I
Oh,
know. And I am the first one to say you never meet the love of your life on a night out or after a few beers. But yeah, it was a really random Tuesday night. My friend and I decided to go out for a few cocktails, and there Carl was over the bar. And then the rest is
the
history.
rest is
First
history.
night.
Yeah, yeah. Very very authentic meeting, let's just say. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how long have you been together, may I ask?
We've been together nearly 10 years now,
Right, yeah.
married for 2.
Congratulations. Well, Georgie and I met very simple, and that was at the gym.
Love
Um,
that, of course.
and I wasn't a trainer. I was the desk man. I was pretty much the manager, so it kind of makes it worse, doesn't it? But anyway, Zara, thanks for jumping on. For those of you who don't know Zara, Zara's a Elite 15 HYROX athlete. Zara's competed in the last 2 majors of this season, which was in Chicago and then Stockholm, and then is racing on Friday night in Vienna. Um, Zara, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna work kind of backwards to go forwards, if and that'll make sense in a second. How did, just to sum up, directly go into how did the first 2 majors go this year?
Okay, the first 2 majors went really well. So obviously it was an experience racing grid formation, so something that I've not done previously. And obviously for the listeners, I'm not sure if you know, but grid formation, essentially you have your own lane for a lot of the stations. So for exercises such as like burpees, for lunges and stuff, farmers carry, you are literally walking down your lane and turning back on yourself. And actually it feels a lot harder than it possibly would do kind of like in a normal venue. If we go back to Chicago, by the way, amazing to see Chicago. It's like feeling so grateful that I've managed to see some really cool places. The time difference was always a little bit of a worry for me. I did arrive kind of 2 to 3 days earlier, so kind of managed to settle in. And also, I have an oil intolerance, so I always have to stay in Airbnbs when I go away to make sure that my food's okay. But for me, Chicago went really well. I mean, it's always amazing, great opportunity to obviously race against the best. I'd been working a lot on my running prior to Chicago, and it felt good. I think I was able to kind of stay in sort of like the middle of the pack for the first half of the race at least. But what I did find in Chicago is I was redlining in a lot of the stations that require probably more strength. So things like the ski, the sled push, the sled pull. And I was thinking, I actually need to probably go and work on a little bit of my strength when I go back to the UK because my running was there, but because I was having to work so hard in the stations, actually it was compromising one of my main strengths.
Yeah.
For me, obviously, the race being, like I said, in the morning, no, actually, it was mid afternoon, sorry, in Chicago, worked quite well. But I think I came 10th overall in Chicago, so I was absolutely bowled over. I kind of didn't even expect to come within
Yeah.
that top 10, so it was great. Then between Chicago and Stockholm, didn't have too much time, did we really, to
No,
do
we didn't.
anything. So, like I said to you, I wanted to focus on more of strength. So I did start kind of a strength block, kind of where I went back to the basics of looking at some compound lifts, so back squats, deadlifts, trying to work well over the weight of the sleds, etc., hoping it would feel easier going into race. Um, and then Stockholm came around and I managed to get an overall PB, so 103.59, which was awesome. Feel like everything kind of came together in that race. Much preferred working out and racing in the morning first thing, because it just meant that you had to get one good meal under your belt rather than kind
Yeah.
of the worry of getting three or
Right.
four. But yeah, again, still some massive lessons learned from Stockholm as well. I think wall balls, certainly the sleds continued. They really did need some work because again, I was probably looking at my rankings, the lower across those, but it at least then gave me some data to take into my next training block to kind of get me where we are today.
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, what I found interesting what you just said there is how if you were redlining the stations, how much it would affect your running. And I'm assuming in your mind you put your running as your biggest strength, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
Um, and it's just so interesting. Obviously, anyone who's probably watching this is into HYROX. It's amazing how you can change the way you do a race and the outcome, or you can change so what's the right word? Like the race can change so dramatically,
mm.
even if you've just altered something slightly, if that makes sense. And I'll be honest with you, I'm probably exactly the same. I try to treat my running as my strength, hence why I try not to overdo it on the stations. But we'll get into that a bit more when we talk about programming and actually how you train, Zara. But how did you get into HYROX in the first place?
So my first race I did as a mixed doubles back in November 2022. My background, I suppose, was kind of from team sports. I've played a lot of netball, which for those that don't know is quite similar to basketball, but you just can't move with the ball. I was into football rounders, like everything as a kid, and then kind of found the gym probably maybe late teens, like early 20s. So managed to get a good foundation of strength. And one of my friends that I did it with was like, look, there's quite a lot of running here. There's a bit of strength work. I think it'll be right up your street. Do you fancy it? And I think mixed doubles for anyone who's maybe even thinking about doing a HYROX or doubles is a really good way to start for your first race. It's great to go and feel the atmosphere. It's good to understand how the stations are. And actually, even though you're kind of working to your VO2 max within the short distances and you're sharing the stations, you are actually getting a little bit of rest as well. So it's a
Yeah.
great sort of like feeling point. But we did it together, obviously straight on the male weights, which the sled pull, I had no experience of even how to pull it. So I was falling over, doing all the things that yeah, that just I would probably laugh at now. But we did it in 106 actually. So we came kind of top 10, which was good. Again, probably because running was both of our strengths. And then my partner kind of said to me after I was on the HYROX high, and I was like, this is definitely up my street. And he was like, I think you're a little bit too competitive for me. Like, I'm going to leave you to go and do it on your own. So that was kind of the start anyway.
Nice, nice. And is that your partner that pretty much said to you just then, you're too competitive, I'll leave you on your own. Is that correct? Are you saying that I'm assuming that comes from your upbringing and are you a very competitive person, Zara?
Yes, 100%. I mean, I know you've met my dad a few times, James.
Yeah, yeah.
My mum and dad are both very competitive. Like I grew up, my mum played netball, and I used to kind of go on the sidelines to watch her every Tuesday as a baby. My dad played rugby, and when I focus on something, I'm always 100% in. I'm very, very dedicated. So I think he probably looked at maybe the amount of training or stuff that it would require even across the board from kind of like nutrition and stuff, and thought it wasn't for me.
Yeah, yeah. But it's so interesting because the more I'm in this industry, and I'm calling HYROX as an industry,
Yeah.
HYROX, it has its own industry now, right? The more I understand that the elites or the people that are doing very well come from a very multi um,
Faceted almost.
correct upbringing, and also just have a competitive nature about themselves. They're not necessarily really good at one thing. They're good at a lot of things.
Hmm.
And that's how I got brought up. I was okay. I was good at a lot of sports. I played a lot of sports, but none professionally or none even semi-professionally, right? Um, and the one thing that, and I've said this time and time again, the one thing that I've learned because I wasn't that great at something when I was a kid, Zara, if I wanted to make the A team in rugby, or I wanted to make a development squad in my Aussie rules, I had to work so hard. I had to work so much. And I can't really say for others, but it looked or it felt like I had to work a lot harder than my others, right? My other peers. And then now I found HYROX. It's as simple as it's smartly. If you can work the hardest smartly, you're going to do really well. And that's why I love this sport, because I said this to Georgie last night. If you don't do the work, HYROX won't lie to you. Like,
Exposes you, doesn't it?
it exposes you, and it is what it is. Like, it'll expose you.
Yeah.
Um, and like, I don't know, like I'm going on a tangent here, but I feel like I personally, and maybe you can comment on this as well. I personally feel like for us who have been in this new Elite 15 major structure, we've had it. For me personally, I feel like we've had some sort of a best case scenario for the last 6 months, because Chicago was the first one in the calendar. When was that? November.
Yeah.
Soon as Chicago hit, 3 weeks
Mm.
was Stockholm. So we had no time to think about Chicago, think like to even have downtime. So we immediately had to go into kind of recovery,
Yeah.
but then training mode for Stockholm, to then have Christmas, but then all of a sudden Vienna's literally in 3 days' time.
I know.
What I'm saying is I've really enjoyed the different structure this year with the Elite 15 majors and stuff. I guess like more on how you got brought up, Zara. Obviously, you just mentioned I have had met your father before in Stockholm, and if it wasn't for a couple of the logistics that were going on, I think myself and your father would still be chatting about rugby. We were just we were literally just like chewing the fat about all things rugby. He does come from a very professional rugby coaching background. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Gosh, he's been in rugby since the day I was born, and kind of always coached at quite a high level. And he also comes from quite a big family. So there's like three boys, and he also has a sister. So that kind of, I guess, competitive nature was probably brought to him quite early as well. Like my granddad
Yeah.
was sort of like very strict too. So it is interesting. I think the way you are brought up and the sort of way your parents are, I guess you do take a lot of those characteristics on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like I think that's kind of why I really gelled with him when I first met him, to be honest, because he kind of reminded me of my father. And I could tell he was a very clued on coach, and not necessarily to do with anything high rocks or specifics of fitness. It was just like you could tell he was a rugby coach, a very professional, profound rugby coach, and I really like that about his aura. And it kind of, to me, it kind of sums up how you are, because we've met a handful of times now, and you've met Georgie now, and it's been great to kind of understand where you've come from in relation to meeting your father, to be honest. And this is the one thing I tell my athletes, obviously, like coaching online, and you're doing the same. It's actually having a look at your past conditioning. And I'll just like full stop period that conditioning of everything. It's not the last 6 months and what you've been doing training wise. It's actually what you've done for half a dozen years, if not more. Hence why I'll be the first to say, I'm proud to say that due to my Australian rules football background, and also my running background, and also playing anything and everything under the sun, I was able to step into HYROX and do quite well straight up.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happened last year? You had that mixed doubles first HYROX experience in 2022.
Yeah.
And then what did you do after that?
So then I wanted to try my first solo, but didn't want to jump straight into pro. So I had my first open in Bilbao, I think it was February 2023. Again, had that kind of strength background. So just really focused on my running and engine for that race. Did well. I think I came first age group and second overall. So I got my qualification for Worlds. Because I knew at Worlds, everyone who qualifies through Open has to do the pro weights. I wanted to get another race under my belt doing pro before the Worlds at Manchester.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing London Pro, I think it was in April. And again, kind of between that time, had to switch more from that running and engine focus, more to kind of a strength, muscular endurance side of things, because obviously the weight's a heck of a lot heavier in terms of the sets and things. So focused on that, and then managed to win London overall, which was great, amazing.
Wow.
And I think one thing to mention is when, and I'm sure maybe the listeners will agree, when you go into a race and you don't have any sort of expectation on you. And when I went into my London Pro race, I just wanted to finish. There was a field packed of women that I'd followed on Instagram and admired for so long. But because I didn't have the pressure, I guess, on myself, I sort of allowed myself to go into this flow state. And the race felt great. Like, although my face would have said different on a couple of the stations, it really was super enjoyable. And I think now I try and think back to how I felt in that race in terms of sort of finding my flow and just taking station by station. And that's something that I try to sort of put in place in my elite races as well.
Yeah.
I guess for you as well, do you find that when you are in the flow and your mind isn't distracted everywhere, you obviously tend to perform and feel a lot better throughout the race?
Absolutely. My example of that, Zara, is when I got called up to the Elite 15 at the World Champs last year. I don't know if you know the story, and for the listeners, quickly, Tim Vinish unfortunately had to pull out 20 minutes before the race, and I had the option to either race or not, pretty much. And long story short, what I'm getting at, because I only had 20 minutes, I had nothing to lose. And I just went out there and soaked it all up, embraced it, and ended up coming eighth. And I feel you, because I think the mentality of racing and mentality of athletes is HYROX athletes specifically is something that I don't think we tap into enough, or we don't talk about enough. Because here's something, right? From my end, and it's only my opinion, it's not right nor wrong. I don't want to give him credit, but apart from Hunter, I feel like all the other Elite 15 athletes are in a very similar are on a very similar fitness levels. We probably run very similar paces. We lift probably very similar weights. We're very similar athletes. But the thing that kind of can ultimately make or break someone is up here.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I shouldn't even have said that about Hunter, but let's give him credit. He's the world champion and has been for so long, for quite some time, and also is 2 minutes or that thereabouts quicker than anyone else so far. So
And Meg is of, Meg Jacoby
exactly.
is exactly the same in kind of my field as well.
So there's there's so much talk about, and good to bring this up because I understand that you're full-time and online HYROX coach as well, right? It's good to bring this up because I'm the biggest believer that programming and training for HYROX and the process, a consistent process over time, is the only thing that anyone can focus on. You're
Mhm.
not gonna you're not gonna um, make the Elite 15 overnight, or things don't happen overnight. But what you can understand is how important the mentality is when it comes to a HYROX race.
Mhm.
Here's a kind of like a story from I and Zara and the listeners. I do a workshop with all my athletes on a Monday morning. It's called JK 20 minutes with me to kickstart the week, right? And there's always a different topic. We always go into some sort of specific homework. And last week was everyone had to do 300 meters extra burpee broad jumps to focus on the skills, right?
You
Yeah.
are horrible.
Yeah,
You're a mean coach.
they hate me, but they'll love me come race
Yeah,
day,
they
right?
will.
So on and so forth. Okay. But one thing that I try to do is try to get them in my head sometimes about how I view how a high rock should feel,
Yeah.
right? Because we all kind of think, it sounds very common. We train for something very hard to ultimately get to a race. In that race, hopefully the feeling and the stimulus of that race
Mhm.
is easier than what we expected because of our training.
Yeah.
But in fact, it's totally and should be the other way around.
Mhm.
And full stop, period. What I was telling my athletes is that the more dialed in, or the faster you get, or the fitter you get and the stronger you get, the more you can push, ultimately meaning the more it should hurt.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And
Like,
I think you're right because I always talk to my athletes. We have this fight or flight response, don't we? That's sort of natural way we can react to something. So when we go into a race, ideally we want to be in kind of flight mode and not in fight where our heart rate skyrockets because something does feel extra heavy or we're not used to it. And that's obviously the importance of really good kind of programming and doing these hard workouts. And I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about the difference between something being hard and something being uncomfortable. And we have to sometimes remind ourselves that in a HYROX race, we feel uncomfortable. We are pushing ourselves to the limit with all of these things. But I'm sure a lot of the listeners, and we've been through lots of other hard situations in our life that we've had to get through, but we just have to remember it's uncomfortable for a period of time. It isn't hard. Do you agree?
oh, absolutely. I think I listened to I can't have the name of the
I think it was the latest Rocks Life one.
with Ben Bergeron.
That was it.
It,
Yes.
and it's so true. I mean, not going down too much of a rabbit hole here, but it's your perspective of what hard is as well.
Mhm.
And we don't have to go into this, but how many athletes, or like, I'm a bit of a nerd of like the triathlon world, right?
Mhm.
Love the stories behind the elite triathletes out there. There's so many of them, Zara, who come from a very hard upbringing.
Mhm.
And as a result, they probably think a 3.8 kilometer swim, a 180 kilometer bike ride, and a 42 kilometer run is a walk in the park because of what
Yeah.
they come from. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
actually someone's perspective on what hard is as well. So you are a full-time online coach?
Yes, I am. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I probably have maybe a third of my clients are specifically HYROX, and then others actually I have some doing half marathons, some doing marathons, others are just starting their health and fitness journey. So it's really nice actually. I have kind of like a nice widespread of clients.
And is it all online or is it face to face as well?
No, everything's online.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. And so whereabouts are you based?
So I'm based in Stamford, which is East Midlands of the UK. So our closest city is probably Nottingham for anyone
Okay.
that's around there.
Yeah, yeah. And so take me through, like, did you start that last year when you started HYROX? Did you go all in, I'm gonna become a coach as well? Or what were you doing beforehand?
No, so before I was working, I've been a coach probably for about 3 years now, 3.5 years. I was in corporate world, so I worked for like a food retailer as a project manager.
Yeah.
It was kind of in people change. So, funnily enough, I was helping people like put data systems in place and very, very different to coaching. But I always had such a passion for health and fitness. And like I spoke about, kind of grew up in sport. So I did online coaching alongside my work. And then kind of reached a point where I had enough clients that probably they weren't really in the HYROX space originally. It was very much lots of either men or women kind of wanting to get into strength training or wanting to improve their running. And then I suppose as I got into HYROX, managed to get a few more clients within the racing space, and then left my corporate job. Would be about a year and a half ago now.
Right. Yeah,
Doing
yeah.
full time, so it was a big transition. But I'm a massive believer in if you really have a passion and you can monetize that passion, you absolutely have to go and do it because we are on this, not to get too deep, but we're on this planet once, and there's nothing worse than having Sunday scaries. And the corporate job just,
Yeah.
it wasn't doing it for me. And it was the best kind of leap of faith, although scary at the start, I could have done because I'm like you. I can see from ear to ear how much you love what you do and how much you enjoy working and helping clients. And that's exactly what I enjoy doing too.
Yeah. I spent 29 years upon the planet having Sunday scaries. So until I had a crack. Full stop. I just had a crack at doing what I'm doing now, and the rest is history, like so to speak, right now. And again, sorry to bring what I do with my athletes up. Like yesterday, I asked my athletes the question on if you could do anything in the world and you knew you wouldn't fail at it, what would you do? Like no matter what would you do? And I actually sat there on the Zoom and I wasn't necessarily going to answer it myself, but I just kind of paused and I was like, well, I'm actually doing it right now. And that's how I truly feel. Uh,
Yeah.
and I feel like you're very similar, you know,
Yeah.
and it's just great being a part of a community as well that is not driven by, like, I love the health and fitness industry and how it is, but I personally, and sorry, I should have just stated, since school, I've been in the health and fitness industry. So I was managing gyms for about 10 years until I started doing this online coaching. And um, I understand how toxic it can be when aesthetics is the number one priority. Let's just put it that way. I love being a part of a community that performance is the number one priority. And there's
Yeah.
such a difference. Do you agree?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I love the fact that, HYROX is very accessible to all. And
Yeah.
we do not put kind of that pressure or priority on how somebody looks. And I think I've spoken about this before. If you look at the kind of Elite 15 lineup, for example, for the women, there are lots of different body types. And I've been asked this question, actually, do you think there is a specific perfect body type for HYROX? And the answer is absolutely no. The fact that it brings in, all of these different areas from strength, power, speed, etc., there isn't one body type that's perfect for
No.
it. So it's just about finding sort of, I guess, a weight that works for you. And I've had to battle with this more recently. So, like I said to you, I have just been in a strength program and I wanted to put a little bit of muscle mass on. Because of my background in kind of sport, I've always had a lean body type and been able to put on muscle quite easily and had definition. But I've always been sitting around the same weight, probably for the past few years. And seeing the scales go up more recently because I am eating more, actually sometimes it's difficult. When I look in the mirror, I kind of feel that I look a little bit more bloated. I don't feel as great. I don't feel as athletic. But now I think playing in this sort of elite space, I'm now understanding that nutrition and performance will always outweigh these aesthetic benefits. And previously, I've had clients say to me, well, I need to stay quite light because I've got loads of burpee broad jumps to do, or I need to stay light because I've got running to do and I don't want too much on the frame. But if you do not have the energy to do those burpee broad jumps or running, you're not going to be able to complete the race.
It's
And
crazy.
yeah,
It's crazy. Sorry. What's crazy is that I had this discussion with someone last night because like, food and nutrition is a touchy subject. I'll be the first to say, and rightly so. But what I said before about I love being a part of this community, it's done me wonders, Zara, by not necessarily having to care or wanting to care about aesthetics and aesthetics only. All I care about is, I'll give you a quick example, mid run, mid threshold treadmill run, feeling as if I'm got the energy to push. 6 months ago or a year ago or whatever, I wouldn't have, because I wouldn't have had that gel or that bit of honey beforehand, because I thought, no, it wouldn't give me abs.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, I think it's a big something like HYROX. Like HYROX as an industry is solely doing is wonders for people that do have some I guess like mental challenges with food,
yeah,
because
yeah,
at the end of the day, and again, I said it's amazing we're talking about this. I said this last night to someone. It's amazing when you are mid-race or mid-run and your body just goes, nah, not today. And it's probably to do with lack of nutrition. And I've been there during race where it's just like, nah.
mm.
And it's so important. And again, it's not spoken about enough. May I ask, do you have a nutrition degree or anything behind you, or?
No, I don't have a nutrition degree. Obviously, as part as doing kind of level 2 and 3 personal training qualifications, you do learn a lot. But I've just done my own. I always had kind of a passion for understanding what I'm putting in my body and kind of how it reacts with your gut and stuff and how it affects your performance. So I've just done a lot of reading up about it. But I just want to touch on something kind of before we maybe delve into nutrition. I raced in Manchester very recently, and relative to me, I had a really poor race. I think from an outsider perspective, people would have said you did great, but it was down to really poor fueling that come probably about the second run. I was thinking, I can't do this. I don't think I can even finish the race.
Wow.
It was probably my first time racing in the evening. Yes, I had a good source of carbohydrates kind of throughout the day. Hydration was on point, but I didn't eat enough volume. And I probably think I had a bit of a mental lapse before going into the race, thinking, I don't want to feel bloated. I don't want to need the toilet during the race because I probably wasn't used to working out with so much food in my stomach. And it really turned around to bite me in the bottom. And for me, I struggled throughout the race, and kind of my mental game was probably gone by about run four. So just the importance of having a good nutrition strategy and actually trialing things. Like, you're never going to get it right first time
No.
these races. It's not all about severely carb loading, because you do have to get used, your body has to get used to the amount of carbs you take on board. But actually, it is about tweaking a few things so that you have kind of slower release carbohydrates on board, etc. But yeah, I just wanted to say, even as an elite athlete, there are races where you do get things wrong as well. And I don't know whether maybe you've had some experience in terms of
Oh,
that as well.
100%. Just I guess like on this topic then, right? And look, I'll be the first to say, and I always say this, I'm not a nutritionist either. Um, I have learned time and time again probably about a decade of trialing
Yeah.
things myself for performance. And I personally think that's what everyone should be doing. It's a trial and error game, right? Zara, what do you believe, like, and thank you for kind of telling that story. Do you think you're talking about not fueling the day of the race, or are you talking about the week, 2 days, 3 days? Are you talking about just the day? What?
To be fair, for me, it was more on the day, but going into a race, I think it is still important to increase your carbs a couple of days before and really focus on things like your hydration. So,
Yeah.
for example, going into a race, a couple of the supplements that I maybe would rely on and take. I mean, I take creatine daily. I actually start with some beetroot shots. If I'm racing on a Friday, I'll probably start either Tuesday or Wednesday and have 2 to 3 of those. I use the Beat It brand, not a sponsor or ad, by the way.
Yeah.
And obviously they contain nitrate, so essentially it helps to get kind of like more oxygen to the muscles. So I'll be loading up on those. And then I'll really focus on making sure that I have really good amounts of carbs and good sources. So things like sweet potato, I know does well with me, rices, pastas, oats, I'm a massive fan of, making sure that actually I'm starting to carb load probably at least a couple of days out. But
Yeah.
for me, in that instance, it was on the day that probably had the effect that it did.
Yeah. Dina and Tom Hogan, right, spoke about this in a podcast, and um, I've learnt the hard way, right, by thinking to myself, even with hydration, right,
Mhm.
it's only important on the day of the race, and you try and scramble in so much on the day, and you feel as if that's going to hold you in good stead,
Yeah.
carb wise, sugar wise, hydration wise. But in fact, what they said was, from a glycolytic point of view, you want the carbs to be in your cells pretty
Yeah.
much days before, at least 24 hours, 48 hours before the race, because that's when the actual glucose, so to speak, will be used. That's when the sodium hydration
Yeah.
will be able to be used come the race, not 2, 3 hours before the race. Two
Yeah.
hours before the race, we shouldn't be thinking about scrambling things in, because we're already feeling good. Do you agree with that?
100%. I
Yeah.
mean, for a lot of my athletes, and you might have this, and even myself, I like training in the morning. I like training first thing. So I get to the gym probably between 6 and 6:30. And I'm one of these people that I can't eat. I don't want to get up that early, a couple of hours
Yeah,
before
yeah,
I eat. So you have to think about, it's actually the meal that we have the evening before. That's our energy source. And you have to think about that, obviously, even with the race. So
yeah,
it's super important a couple of days before, and just banging and just touching on the hydration side of things. Like, our body is made up of like 80% water. Not only is it amazing for our complexion, but if you are, I think, between like 1 to 5% kind of dehydrated going into a session, I think it decreases your performance by up to 20 to 20%,
yeah.
which I think in HYROX, when you're out the gate and you're sweating immediately, you're losing so much water and sodium so quickly.
Yeah, it's crazy. Hey,
Mm.
like to sum this nutrition chat up, like for the listeners, as we both have just said, there's no right nor wrong with nutrition. It's you trying to work out the best formula for yourself. Getting help is really good, but you've got to work out by trial and error. Um, and that's how I view it with my athletes as well. Zara, I was gonna ask you, like, well, first of all, I'll actually firstly say, I'm coaching close to 75 athletes around the world now. I love programming.
Mhm.
I love getting getting feedback from an athlete from their last week of training and going, okay, due to this, I'm going to tweak something up this week because it might benefit you on the long run. I love the theory of actually diving into someone's feedback and going, no, I'll tweak something or change something here and there. Um,
Mhm.
my question to you is like, do you feel like there's a difference between being a coach versus just being a programmer?
100%. So I would say that I am a coach. So for a lot of my athletes, I kind of work across three pillars, probably similar to you. So we have training, nutrition, and lifestyle. And I think going back to what we discussed earlier, it's really important to have an overview of all of those because they all connect. For example, I know if one of my clients has a really bad day at work, and they go and don't fancy going to the gym, that obviously affects them completing their session or hitting the weights it should be.
Yeah.
So going back to what you said, I can then have a look at their feedback, we can have a conversation, and then I can tweak things going into the next week. For me, whilst there is an opportunity, an avenue for programming, potentially for someone that just wants something in black and white, um, all you are getting is that face value. It's not personalized. And I like to get to know my clients on a very personal level so that I can help in as many arenas as I can. And I guess you're exactly the same.
Exactly the same. And I love hearing that because that's coaching. Like that's what a coach does. It's understanding that bad day of work, that athlete that had a bad day of work, understanding that they didn't end up getting that gym workout done and going, you know what, that's okay.
Yeah.
But due to that, let's do this or let's do that. Um, I get frustrated, and I don't want to be negative here, but I get frustrated that anyone can put on their Instagram bio, HYROX coach, HYROX program,
Yeah.
especially coach. And again, going back to your dad, but like, I think I personally would not, sorry, I know he would probably really understand there's a difference between purely coaching on an individual level and trying to get the most out of a human being in
Mhm.
the rugby game is far more important than your threshold pace.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And that's something that I kind of pride myself on. And as I said, obviously our job at the end of the day, and this is how I try to think on the day to day, right? The end of the day, my athletes are paying me for really good training
Mhm.
for HYROX. So of course the programming is very important. And
Mhm.
that's the essence, I guess. But to the added value is really the individual care factor of the individual care factor of the
Mhm.
human being. So
Yeah, absolutely. I
um
absolutely agree. And I think also going back to, everyone is so individual. When it comes to HYROX, we know there is so much to train. So the fact is, you need to work in training blocks and have focuses and priorities that are relevant to that individual. So, for example, if we were to take me and you, we probably do have, very different kind of strengths. Therefore, whilst these blanket programs are maybe a good starting point, they wouldn't take into consideration the areas that you need to focus. It's very data driven rather than people driven. And we
Correct.
sit in this camp.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's such a difference. There's such a difference. And I've learned, look, I've learned very well, I've had some great coaches in my life. I got brought up with my father, who's a what's the right word to use? Not a life coach, but he's a very holistic coach when it comes to like a human being, and he's a leadership kind of guru and trying to get the most out of the human being. So I got brought up with that type of kind of environment and coaching, and then on top of that, I'm still working with my cross country coach from grade 8.
I
So
heard that on a podcast that you did. I love that.
yeah, and when I say I'm working with, he's not specifically giving me workouts to do because that's not what his role is, I guess, or our friendship. Because at the end of the day, it's to do with our friendship now and our connection. But I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by him, Coach Gunny, who just gets it when it comes to coaching.
Yeah.
It's more about understanding that human being and how to get the most out of that human being as much as possible. Yeah.
And
Old
that's
old school style, yeah.
And that's interesting though, because even, you don't necessarily have to have all these coaches or with these titles in your life. Actually, it's just about thinking who are the people that you maybe spend time with or listen to. It might even be podcasts or you might read about them that actually really help you, either mentally or physically. Like, do you listen to something and go, oh gosh, I can really relate and I can really implement exactly what they've said in my life? And
Yeah.
it's just about finding those people. You don't have to, it's not about going to pay for a ridiculously expensive life coach. It's just
No.
about surrounding yourself with maybe a couple of people that can tap into different areas that you might not be able to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, not you, it sounds like using them, but like
Yeah.
using the quality relationships that you have in your life. And you met Georgie the other night. Georgie and I have been in Germany for the last 6 months, and it's been absolutely amazing. We've absolutely loved it. We're actually taking off in 2 weeks' time, though,
Mhm.
to Glasgow. We're actually just going up to live in Glasgow. And
Cool.
you know what the reason is? Because again, why not? Two,
Mhm.
because of the people that we've met that live in Glasgow.
Mhm.
And we're like, well, we've only got a couple of months left. Let's really enjoy our time that we have left and experience it and get as much as we can out of it by surrounding ourselves with really quality people as well. So that's our plan moving forward. Zara, I was going to ask you a couple of kind of questions to wrap it up, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, what's your goals this year in the HYROX space
So
this
my
year?
goal, yeah, this year, my goal, I would love to stand on the start line in the Elite 15 at the World Championships in Nice. So it is going to be difficult. In all honesty, I have my sights set on Cologne, which is a last chance qualifier. So we're not sure on how many spaces will be available, but there are two last chance qualifiers. There's one in Cologne, one in Anaheim about 4 weeks later. And I'm hoping that I will get a spot through one of those. So I am back to after Vienna. Like I said to you before, I've actually just moved over to Dina and Tom as coaches to kind of bring all my
Brilliant.
coaching into one, which is super exciting. So I'm going to get a few good blocks under my belt, and then aim for one of those to try and qualify. But if not, hopefully do as well as I can in my age group and enjoy Nice because I've never been there.
Yeah, great, great. I'm glad you kind of summed it up like that because I'm in the same boat, right? I don't have my ticket to Worlds yet, my goal is to be at that start line, the Elite 15 race in Nice, right? Um, if it happens, it's meant to happen. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I'll be there to try and win my age group as well.
Exactly.
Um, I'm so excited that you're working with Tom and Dina as well. As I said, I've got two coaches, and for the listener right now, I think to sum that up, us Elite 15 athletes have coaches as well, and we need them as well.
Mhm.
Um, and you've probably got the best in the business right now. So I'm excited for you. Really excited.
I mean, I'm excited, but I'm probably week one into a couple of their workouts, and I get them, and I'm like, I don't know if I've got this in me.
I bet.
But I'm
Yeah.
super excited because, like you say, I think we obviously program for a lot of people, and sometimes it's great actually for it to be taken at our own hands. So we're like anyone. At the end of the day, I love rocking up to the gym and someone telling me what I've got to do on the day rather than really have to think about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and they're both amazing. So yeah, super excited to get started with them.
Yeah, and we'll actually see them in Vienna this weekend.
We will.
Very excited. Second, so you got two more questions, all right? Secondly, what is your favorite HYROX workout or favorite style of workout that you do on the regular?
Probably favorite style would have to be, I mean, I always love an engine workout,
Yep.
one of those grinders.
90.
And this is weird, but I do enjoy pairing some of my weaker movements together. So actually, I'll always have a run in there because it makes me happy and it's my strength. But then something like maybe doing like starting off with like a higher distance run into burpee broad jumps into wall balls, and then actually gradually decreasing the reps as you move through. But a good 40-50 minute.
Yeah, like an engine grinder.
Yeah, can
Yeah.
get stuck into.
Yeah.
What about you?
Mine would honestly, I'm a sucker for literally like a long zone two run outside.
Really?
I just love it. It's something like I've been lucky that where we're living, Zara, is like there's like a big rainforest like right outside our door. So
Nice.
I love my Mondays because I do a 90-minute run on a
Mhm.
Monday and I literally just I like I like get itchy for it. I just love it.
I do love a zone two. I mean, I in Stamford where I live, there's so many hills.
Is
On
there?
Yeah, it's a nightmare. I really have to kind of get in my car and travel to somewhere that's quite flat. But I have started listening to podcasts more on my zone two runs, which I normally do on a Sunday. Because do you ever
Yeah.
fall into the trap of you put a playlist on, a good song comes on, and
Oh, I'm
your
off.
heart
Yeah,
rate's through the
yeah.
roof.
And that's the thing. I always listen to podcasts on my zone two work,
Yeah.
and then an engine grinder. I'm always I don't know,
Dance.
like a poppy playlist. Yeah. So
Yeah, love that.
it's funny. Hey, last question, and one I'm stealing this from something that I saw the other day, and also I'm gonna ask this question for everyone who's gonna jump on the Hybrid Hub chats. Okay, if you could have a night out with three HYROX people, who would they be and why?
Wow, three high rocks.
How good? How good's I'm not taking this one because I did steal it off a YouTuber. But if you could have a night out, like a big night out with three HYROX people,
Yeah.
who would they be and why?
I'd probably say Nat Boyle. Was he right? Like he
Oh,
does.
she has a
She
crack, hey? Yeah,
she
yeah.
is great. I think she'd be so good on a night out. I think I'd have to go. What about Faisal? On the
Oh,
MC,
you stole one. He's like my number one, I think.
he
I
would
think
be
Baz would
super.
be,
He'd be
yeah,
super. Do you know what? Him, Gus, and Getty would be awesome. To be fair, as a
yeah, yep. Last one.
um, I think it'd have to be Georgie because she'd be great fun,
Oh,
and I love her.
I think you beat me to it. Georgie was my number one, of course.
Oh, of
But
course.
I'll be honest, Sarah, she is fun on a night out. I
I
tell
can
you what, those
imagine.
those dance moves, those dance moves
Good.
are crazy.
Okay. I'm excited to see them one day.
Yeah, one day. Zara, thanks so much for the chat. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did, and the listeners. And um, from my end, I'm super excited to see you and to see you throw down on Friday night.
Yeah, absolutely. Same for you as well. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me on. It was a great chat. Loved it.
Sorry, one more question. Is your father coming?
Yes, he will be there.
I'm excited. I'm excited to chew the fat
He's
with
just
you.
as, I think he's more excited now to watch you than he is me.
Oh, no, that's not
I
right.
think it's true, honestly.
I'll take that. Um, thanks, Zara, and we'll see you Friday. And thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye.
I think we're done. Are you still there?